Welcome all, and welcome to this last session of today, Future of the Profession. How can we adapt in an age of disruption? In my 2 days here at EXPO, I've heard one of the C words a lot, which was about cycle. Just now we were talking about how busy it is here for this EXPO, and that may or may not be a good sign. But today we're here to talk about another C word, and that word is change. Back in 2015, RICS published a futures report, where we looked at drivers for change and related challenges for the real estate sector in the decades to come. In this report, we talked a lot about things that are currently happening. Climate change, political unrest, nationalism, and the effects it can have, and how we need to adapt and change as real estate sector and as professionals as well. I think one point I would like to make before we have a panel discussion is that I think 2 points, what we've also discussed before. Change is already here, it's happening, but sometimes it can be hard to see the signs. So I think the main message for me is look for the signs. And I want to use just one example from more than 100 years ago, just to make that point. And some of you, and I know that Noah has already seen this because I've been in Budapest talking about this, but this is one of my favorite examples. This is a picture of New York City, Fifth Avenue in 1900. And I'm going to ask you, and you can shout, I can see if I can hear it. What in 1900 in New York City was considered to be prime real estate? What did people want to own? What did they want to invest in, etc.? Does anybody have an idea? Sorry. Exactly, horse stables. If you owned a horse stable or a piece of land on which you could build a horse stable, you were the man. I mean, back then real estate was only for men. We can see luckily times have changed. But everybody wanted that. Why did people want to invest in that? In 1900, there were 100,000 horses in New York City. The prediction was that in the next 10 years that would grow until 1 million. If you've read the Freakonomics book, you know this whole story, but just humor me here. 1 million. They had an urban planning conference in 1903, 1904, something like that, for a week, where planners were asked to come up with a solution to the problem of that many horses. We're talking horse manure, horse bodies in the street, parking horses in stables. That conference broke up because they couldn't find a solution. However, those who would have looked around, even in this picture, would have seen that there was already one car driving. The next picture is from 1913, only 13 years later, in a time of which we now think that things were moving slowly and change could be seen coming. A lot of people didn't see it coming. A lot of people, horse owners in New York City, horse stable owners, went bankrupt or had to reinvent themselves and their property. That's the main thing. The sign was already there. There are always some people lagging behind because in this picture, well hidden, there is also still one horse, still. We can bring that to today very easily. We all see, if you've been at the innovation panel, we see that change is happening right now. Disruption is happening right now. So how do we adapt? What do we need to do? And in that, how do we adapt as real estate professionals? Do we need to adapt is the starting question. But if yes, how? How can we do that? And for that, RICS currently is starting a new project after the RICS Futures. It's called the Future of the Profession. We currently have a consultation out, and you can see that on rics.org/future of the profession, where we ask 5 basic questions. It's still open, so I can recommend you to take a photo of that slide or make a note and just help us with answering this question. Because as RICS, I'm not here to tell you the answers. I'm here, we see an issue, a challenge to which we have to find a solution together. The starting point of that consultation are 5 megatrends which we believe will have or already have an impact on the real estate sector of today. And those 5 megatrends are technology, urbanization or rapid urbanization, climate change and resource scarcity, demographics and globalization. So that's the starting point. That came out of the Futures report. And I think with that, for me, it's a good moment to stop talking for a second and go to the panel. And I will ask each of the panel members to introduce themselves. And I will ask them as a first question, just as an opening statement, out of these 5 megatrends. So technology, urbanization, climate change and resource scarcity, demographics and globalizations. Which ones have your attention? Which ones do you consider more important? And are there maybe some trends that we are not thinking about? And I'll just start with the person who's closest to me, Noah.
Hi, my name is Noah Steinberg. I am the chairman and CEO of Wing, which is a property investor and developer active in CEE. I am also, and this is perhaps my most important secondary hat, the chairman of RICS in Hungary, which I'm very proud to be. My first answer, I think, would be technology, and in specific, how technology impacts on the way we use buildings and how we design the buildings and then how we operate the buildings. But that simplified statement leads into a lot of other pieces of the globalization trend, of the demographic trend, how work is performed, and how we have a concept of utilizing our buildings. So I'm sure we'll come back to that.
Thank you.
Well, I'm Barbara Knoflach, heading the real estate asset management business of BNP Paribas. We have all sorts of clients' money, from private individuals to the institutional world. And we, of course, have many different sources of strategies and approaches. And what we see in terms of change coming is very, very holistic. So I couldn't even really pick one of the five just mentioned. We do believe that we will see in all these areas major changes going on in our industry. And I was just reminded by my CEO in France that we do believe that digitalization, to pick that one, the real estate industry will be the second largest impacted industry or sector after transport of digitalization. And I think that's obvious and easy to understand if we just look at the amounts and the volumes and the way we work is so much still manual compared to many other industries, that we have such a long way to go to have everything automated. And only that aspect creates huge change.
Hello, my name is Marie Seiler. I am working for PwC in Switzerland. There I am heading the real estate advisory team. I am also the vice chair of the RICS board in Switzerland. And what I think about the megatrends is that there are two which will influence the industry really a lot in the future. And it's first, urbanization. I'm also a big fan of big cities. And the second one is technology. I think the other one, like demographics, like energy, there is plenty of energy. We have good solution for the demographic change, but we will be struggling with the technology and with the urbanization.
Hello. I'm Joan Gutes from Barcelona, Spain. My background is an architect, but I'm founding partner of Big Quantum, a consultancy firm, and partner of AMA, it's a project management company. No? I'm member of the board and vice president of RICS in Spain. I was a member of the European group contributing to the RICS technical due diligence guidance note. And I have been involved for many years, for example, in 2007 in south of Europe, no, promoting the LEED certificate, and afterwards the BEAM, the industrialization, no, and I have seen how in the last years how the market has been changing, and we are speaking about the future, but we have the future here. In fact, more than a lot of the things that we are going to speak now are here. No? About the questions of the 5 megatrends, I agree with Barbara. No? My point is more holistic. It's very important, the technology, but we need to see more things, and the ethical part and the humankind. We should be able to see how the robots or the machine learning can match with being a person. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Before I move on, just to catch on to a few of the comments that were made. Barbara, you said that the real estate sector will be the second largest sector to be impacted, or is already. What do you think?
Will be. I think for the time being, we are all a little bit in between, and we can see it everywhere. So it's kind of creeping into our systems. I think what we have seen already is the big disruption on all our the way we operate properties. In offices, it's the WeWork style. In retail, it's the wave of e-commerce. yeah, which switches it to logistics. But also in logistics, we will see an adaptation from the large centers and the last minute or the last mile delivery centers. And you could roll that out. Then also on maybe to add the demographics aspect. I think that we are all underestimating that, because if you look at the European aging society, then in about 10 years, and 10 years is nothing, that's tomorrow. Just remember, 10 years is really tomorrow. We will have more than 1/3 of our society in retirement. And honestly, I do not see how we are prepared for that everywhere. So that explains the reason why we have so much attention on hospitals, on senior housing, and all associated alternative sectors.
Thank you. Marie, as one of the two megatrends that you singled out, you mentioned urbanization. And at a global level, we can certainly see that. Cities in China being built in an enormous rate, India. Has urbanization in Europe, has that already finished, or do you see urbanization going on here still as well and or changing?
No, actually, I think the trend of urbanization had just started. We see that the investors, when they were just a few years ago looking into different countries as investment markets, they are nowadays talking only about cities. We do not invest in Spain, we do not invest in Germany, we invest in Madrid, in Barcelona, we invest in Berlin, in Hamburg, in Frankfurt, wherever. So the cities are a big topic, and I think this one will prevail in the industry for a very long time. And the question we have here is how we can manage to prepare the infrastructure for this new stage of urbanization. And also, I think that belongs a lot also to the question of the ownership of properties. I think the ownership of properties will become even more crucial than in the past. And we see, even you have mentioned, Barbara, the e-commerce business. Then, for example, Alibaba and Amazon, they have in 2017 just bought huge chains of grocery stores and shopping centers, and they are entering the ownership of real estate. And also WeWork was valued, according to the last study, at 20 billion. And actually with this capitalization, they are bigger than the largest US REIT, and they will for sure go into ownership of real estate as well.
Yeah, wow, that's good. You mentioned indeed infrastructure as an important component of urbanization. Juan, just how is Barcelona changing itself to be ready for even more people living there, changing cities? Can you say something about that, about your own city?
Well, we did an important effort during the Olympics, so it's very well done. And it's not about Barcelona; it's all the metropolitan area. So there are many actions. We had the stand very close to here, so you can see the new projects, the new developments. No. And it's a key point to have all of these roads, all of the train. So we have planned a lot, not only the lands. It's about how people will move around the city and all the area. It's not about only Barcelona. It's about speaking not 1.6. No, it's about 5 million people that is working around, it's living, and how to communicate.
Thank you. I know it's going to be a nasty question because you all said it's an holistic approach and all megatrends are important. However, I find it interesting that nobody put climate change at the top, and especially since at the beginning of this week we had the new ICCP report, which said that we should really limit ourselves to 1.5 degrees, and we have about 12 years to turn that around. Now, we know we've had these stories before. We've had Al Gore saying we need to act now or it's too late. However, with the current political climate, I don't want to go into that in too much. It seems that with certain countries that could make the biggest difference, they put the least amount of attention to climate change at this moment. What can the real estate sector do to turn things around in terms of climate change within 12 years? I'll start with Noah because I haven't asked a follow-up question to you yet.
Thanks for that, and I will leave the political side of it completely alone as an American sitting up here. I don't know who you were referring to.
Living in Hungary.
Or exactly. I think from the private sector real estate point of view, the biggest piece by far is in our approach to creating green buildings. And as the statistics show that something between 80 and 85% of all emissions come out of the built environment, which means that even though you think about cars and airplanes as being polluters, the biggest single polluters are buildings, be they industrial buildings or office buildings. And I think, and we have a nice segment here of people who look at it from different sides, but our tenants at this point, certainly our more sophisticated tenants, demand that they go into a green building. We look at the green certification process already in the construction phase, and our investors. It's just it has become a necessary check the box sort of thing. We don't build buildings that are not environmentally sound at this point. As the technology progresses further, you have increasing opportunities to do that, be it using geothermal, which is something we have a lot of access to, for instance, in Budapest, using solar, and also limiting the amount of cooling in particular that's required in our buildings, because it's the cooling where we burn the most energy. And if we can use shading technologies, if we can use buildings that are properly positioned and shaded naturally, then we can create greener buildings. The second side of it is how people get to work or to wherever they're going. So to their shopping center or to their, and frankly, in logistics as well. So minimizing road access, minimizing vehicles which are based on carbon fuel, I think, is a key piece. I mean, one of my favorite little bumper stickers you can see is the picture of the bike and the car. And the car makes you fat and runs on money, and the bike runs on fat and saves you money. And we increasingly put bike racks into all of our buildings, and most of our tenants are encouraging their employees to come by bike. So I think there are a lot of ways at that level. Each little piece contributes, and I guess that's the question: is collectively, if different industries are doing enough to try to impact in a positive way.
And if the other.
Well, maybe just to add on what you just said, which of course is one of our major efforts we're trying to achieve, I think that we also have to look at that in a more global context. So one thing is to make the buildings as such more green or more sustainable, but then it's about the embedding of the buildings, bringing them together with the well-being of the tenants or the inhabitants, including integration of that into the environment, so creating really livable areas. And then it's, of course, the question for an asset manager, how does that at the end impact the value of the buildings? So you could make the whole span from the green certification to how will that be translated into real value for the building? And that will be the challenge for us.
I absolutely support this. Actually, it's not yet really well reflected in the values of properties, and it will be better reflected in the future. But actually, speaking here as someone who lives in Switzerland, we are really very ecological, and we go to the office by train, and the buildings are almost all green or low energy housing, etc. But we can afford, and I think Europe is also in this lucky situation. Europe can afford, and US would be also able to afford, but we have still the big developing countries, actually, when you mentioned to have a bit more global look, and these are the big polluters of the future until they will get to a steady state where they can afford not to pollute, and I think this will be the biggest challenge of the future, yeah.
Yes, about technical things, specific things. For example, we have glass now that it's a solar panel. We have new materials, transparent materials. We have new insulation. We have many things. I agree with Noah that transportation is very important as well. And for example, in Barcelona, we have a lot of bikes. I have electric scooter for moving, but I see a huge improvement in the last years. And we'll see a lot of new materials, in the near future, and we must use that.
I think that it's about the question, how can we contribute to create smart cities? And it's not only the big things, it's also the small ones. And one example I would like to just mention is, we have last year decided to use one of our terraces in our headquarters to build a vegetable garden on there. So now we really, and it worked, so it's very tasty tomatoes, I can tell you. and
With
other
the
nice
BNP
herbs.
brand?
Yes. No, we don't do the branding yet, but it's very nice to have a terrace for your employees and for your visitors and your clients to show that you are kind of using the extra space you have to do something productive, yeah, and to give back.
Yeah, urban gardening, also very lovely trend of the urbanization. I like it as well. Yeah.
I like it as well, and I think that's also part of a mindset change we can then create, which is a bigger thing. Yeah. Thank you for that. I want to move on to a next topic. Unless there are any questions or comments at this stage from any of you, like to share their views? If not, we'll move on. In the consultation that I mentioned, rics.org/future profession, we're basically asking 5 questions. And they revolve around which new business models are needed, what are the opportunities that new technology will create, which skills and competencies do people need, what is required, what will need to change in terms of education, and of course finally, what can RICS do to support real estate professionals preparing themselves for the future. With the time that we have today, which is not a lot, and besides having a good discussion, I was also under strict orders to finish on time, because we can already see on the right-hand side what's waiting for us when we're done, which is also why we put the temperature even a few degrees higher in this room than it's outside. But I would like to focus on the new business models, which new business models are emerging and which ones are needed. And new business models, and some of this was already mentioned, they change in the way real estate is built, owned and occupied. It was already said. And I think if we just if we break these points up for as far as that's possible, Juan, I want to ask you as an architect, what are your views on the changes already there or up and coming on the way real estate is built?
Yeah, I think industrialization is here, and we will see more than building, assembling buildings, and 3D printing is right now with us. No, we are improving a lot, but we need to change all of this. The industrialization will be the key issue in the near future.
Thank you, Marie. Over to you. What about the way real estate is owned? What are your views on that? Is that going to change? Broad question.
Actually, yeah, I've already mentioned. I think the ownership of the real estate will stay crucial. Perhaps you want me to touch a bit the topic of crowdfunding and these new fintech topics. I had just yesterday a meeting with someone who is combining the crowdfunding idea with the cryptocurrencies idea. So he has a real estate token and uses it as a mean to finance a crowdfunding platform, which is actually a very cool idea. And we were discussing the details because PwC will be the valuer for this platform. And it was funny because I was exactly thinking about this picture, and I was sitting in a Swiss circle. You know, the Swiss industry is really heavy into financial sector, so you saw there all the classical real estate fund and real estate owners staying there. It was a little bit later, it was like 5:30, and they were there drinking their Prosecco and being really happy about where they are and how they feel and what they earn. And yeah, I think actually all the margins they earn will disappear because of these new fintech possibilities. And you just showed us it took exactly 10 years to went from the horses to fancy cars. And I think it will not take much longer until this classical fund manager will perhaps stop drinking Prosecco and thinking about new ideas.
So what will a fund manager have to do afterwards then?
No, actually, I think, to be honest, the guys who come up with these ideas, they are brilliant, they are innovative, but they are not the one heading one of the DAX or SMI companies. They are not. They need something new every 3 years. But it's important that the big ones sitting around and drinking Prosecco also talk to these people and look for good maturity of this product, and they buy them. Because otherwise there is really a possibility they will disappear from the market.
Yeah, no, that's true. Anybody want to react to that, or?
Well, what we are definitely seeing already now is that we have a lot of pressure on intermediaries because the system, all the digitalization is more or less connecting people directly. So just imagine, that's what I'm trying to bring into my company as an idea. Just imagine that in not so far time ahead of us, you are now already all used to Amazon. You are buying your daily goods and you're using Amazon as a just normal tool, right? So why should that not also be the case in our industry in one point in time? And I think it will be quite soon, yeah? Or that is more the trading part. But then also, you know, if we think about all the communication platforms from Facebook too, yeah, you name them, then if you just think again ahead about our industry, we are the most interdisciplinary industry, one of the most interdisciplinary industries in the world. So therefore, why should there not be a brilliant young team to come up with an idea to set up a kind of communication platform, just a pure platform for exchange, to connect all each of the individual points in our industry? And then we have a complete disruption of almost every aspect in our business.
Noah, you started off with an opening remark saying that for you tech is the main, if you would have to pick one out of the 5 main drivers, then it's the technological changes. And you say that it will fundamentally change how property is used, designed and operated. Can you elaborate? Maybe now is a good time to elaborate on that a little bit. How will real estate be used?
I think what I would do is reflect a little bit back first on what was just said and the pressure on intermediaries. I was told this week, so if it's not true, I apologize, but it made sense to me, that Booking.com is now the largest hotel company in the world, and they own nothing. They own a platform and a fantastic base of contracts. They don't own a building, they don't own a bed, they don't manage the cleaning staff. And I mean, not so long ago when Amazon's, which was still thought of much more as a bookseller, passed the valuation of Amazon past the valuation of Barnes and Noble's, people said, "Oh, that's ridiculous. That's a brick and mortar business where people sell books." Obviously, that's been borne out to be very correct. So I think there's no question that we're moving in that direction. What I was thinking about when I said this was a little bit different, and it was about the changing models in the way we use space. And I was actually thinking very specifically about office space. And one side of it, again, is the WeWork, where the question is, what is the valuation of WeWork and what does that reflect? But the other is just how existing large tenants, and we have very large corporate tenants in our portfolio, ask their employees to use the space at this point. The employee knows when he leaves his house where his parking space will be, or if there's no parking space, then he should take his bike. He doesn't have most of them, at least, he or she don't have a fixed desk. They have a work area and a locker where they can keep their papers. And so what the model is in terms of exactly which direction it takes us, I think it's still open, but what's clear is that the technology is allowing us to think about the space differently, and as that progresses, I think we'll be able to manage it and create value in different ways. That said, it still takes a lot of money to build a building or buy a building, and it takes a lot of expertise and it takes a lot of responsibility. And I don't see those pieces disappearing. So while you can go forward in some ways, I think there are other ways where largely the models or the structures that are in place will, if they are superseded by something else, we don't see it yet.
Okay, thank you. And I think we've often in discussions we heard the term WeWork, we heard how we reuse office space, how people come to work, what they do there. And Amazon, WeWork, they don't own anything. Behind that, though, somebody will still need to own the building. Somebody will still need to maintain the building. Somebody will still need to finance the building. And I was maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, I attended an IFMA RICS facility management conference or roundtable discussion. And there was also an investor there, and he had a specific question to which nobody had the answer in that room. So I think, Barbara, this will be a good question for you maybe. WeWork, Amazon, it also creates more flexibility. So in terms of office space, it does mean less long-term leases, less certainty about your income stream. I think that's a fact. If you go to WeWork, then the question becomes, who is going to pay for that extra flexibility?
That's. I would phrase the question slightly different because we are discussing a lot about where will the value creation end up, and especially in the real estate industry, we are used that the value is created by building and then operating the properties. But if you look at the Amazon or the WeWork models of this world, then you see clearly a shift from the value creation to these type of platforms. Yeah. So I think that the big challenge for the fund managers, but also for all the property owners, is not to become a commodity in that game. The question is where will be more price tag at the end. And the more the Amazons and the WeWorks of this world is taking away, the less you will get in rent for your property. And that is the question, how to balance that equation.
Yeah, perhaps just to add to this, which is a very good remark, I think, the way we occupy the properties changes a lot, and we need to keep our properties flexible enough to answer these changes. But I think actually the flexibility does not cost more money, it generates more money. For example, there are so many shopping centers struggling, and because you have now the pop-up store which do not have any duration of the contract, but you have therefore also always new stores, and the people are coming because there is some change, and there is not only the brands you have seen already 20 times, but there is something new and it changes, and this flexibility also brings a lot of value to existing concepts.
Yeah, my point is that we need to adapt our business, constantly. It's not about to have a model that is functioning. Nowadays, all is changing very fast, so we need to see the market, and adapt. This is the future. But the retail is changing, but there are opportunities as well, depending on how you are seeing.
I think so indeed. And without giving away all your company's secrets, so I think we're talking about changing business models. We have very big companies here, own companies that are. Can you tell a little bit on how you are looking into changing your business model? Who wants to go first?
I can start.
Thank you.
Actually, as an advisor, we need to change each and every day, and I am also very often challenged also by my more senior partners asking me, okay, Marie, what about valuation? Valuation will disappear. Now you can take your smartphone, take a picture, and you have immediately the value of your property, etc. And the same for transaction. They are transaction platforms. They are crowding platforms. They are also transaction platforms for institutional clients. That's all true. But I think there is one point which will be very, very positive for our business, and that actually, with the same amount of people I have today, I can tomorrow do much more business, because if I use all the means of the digitization we have, you can just multiply the services you do today.
Well, I would say technology is not innovation, it's part of it, but it's not all about it. And what we are doing is to use technologies, to new systems, but we did very close service, and we don't have no risk at some point now, but we need to see how all this evolution as well.
Well, we are trying to approach that twofold. One thing is about standardization with digitalization, because I think standardization is a prerequisite to really get the benefits out of digitalization. So in order to increase efficiency, quality, and to free up manpower in order to do the other aspect, which we are much more focusing on, is, we're all talking about more networking and connecting not only data points, but all the different elements in our business. And to free up enough resources in order to get that already done analog and not only digital is already a challenge if you think it through.
Yeah, actually, we have, in our recent survey, we have exactly touched this point, that most of the big real estate managers are trying to digitize the past, to just digitize the processes they already have and make it more efficient. And they really need to, because otherwise we have the falling yields on all of the core markets in Europe. And the only way how you can still generate profit is to become more efficient. So the digitizing the past is the the first and very important step the big owners need to go for. But thereafter, they need to keep their eyes open and look for these new startups and the models which are establishing on the market and incorporate them into their businesses.
Several years ago, when the big blue IBM computer beat Garry Kasparov for the first time, and everybody said, "Okay, that's it. Computers are more intelligent than people." And I saw a very good commentary which said that if you have 64 squares on a board and every move is regulated, you can maybe make that conclusion, or at least that they calculate quicker. But if you're at a lunch with a prospective new employer and your existing boss is sitting behind you, that may not be such a good thing to give to a computer. And I think in the business that I'm in, which is creating new buildings and owning buildings, one street corner is different than another, and maybe you can ultimately win that out of data, but I think the key piece, which is good human judgment and knowledge and experience, will continue to be a key part of what we do over the long term, no matter how much information becomes available to allow you to become more efficient. So I'm a little mixed about it. I think a lot of pieces will change, and some of the really fundamental pieces will remain the same, which is that it's good judgment. Somebody noticed that we don't need as many stables, but we're going to need a lot more parking garages, and they did that. And when they did that, or gas stations, another thing that didn't used to exist, when they did that, they made a lot of money. So, I mean, there are always two sides to that, and I think the key piece is to figure out how to be aware of what's going on around you, and I don't want to jump ahead into but have the right skill sets to be able to digest what you're seeing and then actionably make decisions on that basis.
No, thank you. Good point. And that is actually not jumping ahead, but it's right on tune. Marie already mentioned the evaluation aspect as well. I made a presentation here last year because we were writing a report on the future of evaluations, and there is a copy right there at the bottom, at the back on the right for you, on the left for us. One of the things that we looked there, and if you look at the valuation profession, the same counts for a lot of the other professions inside or outside of real estate, the intermediaries, as we've called them. One of the things that came out of that report is that currently we're still looking at people doing a job from start to finish. In the evaluation report, we described the evaluation process according to 4 stages. I won't name them now, but the main point is that the valuer currently, with the current process, is involved in all 4 stages, from start, negotiating with the client, up until the valuation report. Everybody believes that it will indeed become more of a skill set society where processes of jobs will become fragmentized, so people will need to specialize and we'll see where their niche lies. So I guess with the limited of time that we have left, there is a twofold question in there. Do you agree with that? Do you already see that happening? And 2, again, how are you preparing your staff for the world of tomorrow?
Actually, valuation is one of our core competencies, so perhaps I can start with this topic. Valuation is so much optimized nowadays. Actually, we are working with software, with the asset management software of the client. We are already valuing on their platforms. We are generating the reports just with one button. So actually the really annoying work of collecting the data, putting the data in, has already disappeared because you have the planning data of the client already in the system. So it became actually already such an efficient commodity, and valuation became therefore also very, very cheap. But what will be the value add you can bring as an advisor, as a valuer to the portfolio, is the analysis, because you have everything in a data bank. You have an overview of the data. You can do all the possible analysis, discuss about the potential, discuss about possible acquisition, about perhaps sales of some properties which do not fit the portfolio, and know immediately what is the overall impact on the portfolio, if the yield is increasing or decreasing. So actually the value add today is the advisory, so the advice out of the data, but not on working with the data. That's very easy.
Yeah, the point is that I think that the jobs should move from valuations to advising or consulting. So as Marie is saying, it's more adding values in solutions, analyzing all of the portfolio. It's not about a machine that can say, see the comparables and,
No, I agree. The data part is already automated to a large extent. At least everyone could do it automated, based on what we have available. But what is not so easy, you touched the issue, is it more about specialization going into niches? Maybe that is not a bad idea if you think about the different real estate sectors. So we do need office specialists, we do need logistics specialists, and maybe we do need healthcare specialists. But in terms of fragmenting the process, I think that's more a data issue. On the process as such, I think that we need in the future more people with a holistic view on the overall span and being able to embed the data and to draw the right conclusions out of the data for the future. Because what we're all looking for is the forward value and not so much the backwards one.
Well, first of all, if it's just one button push, I don't know if we're overpaying PwC or not for our valuations.
I don't know how much you're paying.
But I think that obviously so much data is available, and it's also been analyzed automatically. So in that regard, there's no question. The question is, are there people who are able to read it? Right? Are there people who are able to understand it? Because the information is there. And that's true not only in valuation, it's true across the spectrum of what we do. As more and more information is available, how can you process it intelligently and use it to make your business work? And I think that's the challenge. It's probably the challenge in other industries also. And if we think about what we do, it's very uneven. So the construction industry has not progressed a lot in the last 30 or 40 years. Okay, there's BIM and there are other pieces, but if you look at the time it takes to build a project, if you look at the processes involved, if you look at the way the trades come on and off a site, it's kind of like it was. Whereas other industries have been completely overturned in that same period of time. And so I think there's a lot yet to come within the context of real estate as to how we change, and those companies that will be most successful are those who have people working with those skill sets that allow them to understand what's going on around them and then again make decisions on the basis of that information.
I think there's a lot in there, and personally I could go on for hours. I don't think that's what these people want, or maybe not even what you want. So I'll seeing the time, I will go to my final question for you. As said in the consultation that we have also ultimately for RICS, we're a professional body setting and enforcing standards basically to inspire trust in global real estate markets. That's in essence what we do. So as a closing question from my side, how do you see the role of RICS going forward in preparing the profession for the future? And I started with you with the first question. I'll start with you with the last question.
I think that the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors can help, in this, in 3 points. The first point is learning, and I think that this education, this continuous improvement, that all professionals, we can help a lot. The second point is the standards. We need the standards of valuation, of measurements, of ethics or commercial issues. And finally, the third one is ethics. It's more important now than ever if we are working with machines, robots, or all is changing, but need to go deep, with the persons, and these 3 main things, I think that the RICS can help.
Barbara.
Yeah, I think actually as well, for me, RICS stands for quality. So if we work with international clients and we need some special evaluations collect over the whole world, we always look at the qualifications, are the values RICS. So there it's a really big topic. So for me, it's RICS, it's quality. And for me, it's also the network. So network is for me perhaps the main reason I am with RICS, and I'm a big fan of, because the network you cannot digitize at the end. You need a personal relationship. So.
Well, this is also what WeWork and other companies are all about, is mixing people up and making sure they connect and go out of their field. And yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Well, I think RICS has a 150-year solid background, and in times of change, I think one thing is really needed amongst people, and that's orientation. And I think if RICS continues to be kind of an orientation in the industry in this time of change, that would help a lot.
Thank you. And indeed, we are celebrating our 150 years, and we are very proud that we've been relevant for 150 years, but this type of work is also indeed to ensure that we all remain relevant for the next, well, 15 years. That's already a good start, I think. Noah.
Yeah, I think most of what I would have touched on was said. One thing I would add, as Ron touched on the education, is that one of the things RICS I think really provides to its membership is continuing education opportunities. So as the profession changes, as the membership works in it, the opportunity to take part in seminars, to take part in the programs that we run, allows people, I think, to confer with one another, and then also to have the opportunity to continue to deepen their education, which is exactly what we've been talking about. And I think that's a huge value. I also think that ethics, which is at the core of the RICS mission, is also at the core of keeping our industry functioning properly, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of trust involved, and that trust, be it somebody, was mentioned earlier, who is going to pay for the extra value and who is going to reap the benefit of it, is partly based on the assumption that those income streams and those commitments and those obligations will be honored by the people who are making them. And so I think the ability to put at our core an ethical foundation is also then an ability to say this is how the various players in this industry can move forward.
Thank you very much. It was a lot to cover in this short time.